China manufactures a vast majority of luxury goods, sometimes legally, sometimes questionably, but always quietly. That's how it was until last week.
They take almost finished bags from China factories back to their own factories.
Now, those Chinese factories are speaking up, and that too on TikTok.
Do you recognize this style, this bag? Of course you do. For the past more than 30 years, we have been the OEM factory for most of the luxury brands around the world.
What if your $30,000 luxury handbag, the crown jewel of your closet, was actually sewn in the same Chinese factory as a $300 dupe? For decades, brands like Hermes, Louis Vuitton, and Chanel sold us fantasies. Whisper quiet ateliers in France, generational artisans, and price tags that screamed exclusivity. But that fantasy may be unraveling, thanks to whistleblowers, viral TikToks, and leaked documents from inside the very factories where the world's most coveted handbags are born. And here's the gag. Not only are those bags made in China, they've always been. It started like any other viral TikTok. A factory floor, workers hunched over leather, stitching bags with eerie precision. But then, the camera panned, and there it was. A nearly finished Hermes Birkin bag. Not a knockoff, not a dupe, the real thing. And it wasn't being handled inside a luxurious Parisian atelier. It was coming off a Chinese assembly line. In bulk, TikTok blew up. Millions of views overnight. Comment sections turned into war zones. Some people screamed exploitation, others cried fake news. But here's where it got explosive. Multiple videos began to surface from different accounts, all showing the same thing. Birkins, Kellys, and even rare limited edition styles being stitched together far from the artisanal narrative Hermes has sold for decades. The mythology crumbled in real time. And then came the receipts. Industry insiders started chiming in. Workers alleged that the true manufacturing cost of a Hermes bag, leather, labor, and all, hovers around $1,400. That's right, $1,400. Yet Hermes turns around and sells these bags for $38,000. Sometimes even more, depending on the color and rarity. That's a markup of more than 2,600%. Let that sink in. And the story doesn't end there. Instead of issuing a statement or clarifying their supply chain, Hermes went into attack mode. They filed lawsuits. Fast. They didn't deny the bags were real. They didn't even dispute the videos. They just called it stolen property. But insiders whispered something else. This wasn't theft. This was a leak. A calculated leak from someone inside the system who was fed up with the hypocrisy, the exploitation, and the carefully curated illusion. Suddenly, this wasn't just a scandal about luxury bags. It became a war of narratives. Was this a cover-up by a billion-dollar brand scrambling to protect its prestige? Or was it the first real whistleblower moment in luxury fashion? A worker fighting back against a company that made billions off the illusion of exclusivity and French craftsmanship, while outsourcing the dirty work to hidden factories? The backlash was swift. Fashion forums exploded. Reddit threads dissected the court filings. TikTokers stitched the videos, drawing lines between Hermes, alleged third-party suppliers, and a suspicious silence from mainstream fashion media. This wasn't just a leak, it was a reveal, a mask slipping, a long-protected secret in the world of high fashion laid bare for the public to judge. Because if a Birkin isn't handmade in France by a trained artisan, then what exactly are people paying $38,000 for? And more importantly, what else is Hermes hiding? For decades, the name Hermes conjured a single, unshakable image, a quiet atelier in the heart of France. White-gloved artisans bent over polished wooden workbenches, meticulously stitching Birkins by hand. Natural light pours in through tall windows. The scent of premium leather, Togo, Epsom, crocodile, hangs in the air like perfume. It's romantic, even sacred, the stuff of fashion legend. And at the center of this fantasy, the orange box. That box is more than packaging. It's a promise, a symbol, an unspoken guarantee that what lies inside has passed through the hands of masters, French masters, trained for years to achieve perfection. It's a cultural export as powerful as champagne or haute couture. You don't just buy a Hermes bag. You inherit a piece of France itself. Or, at least, that's what they've always told us. Because behind that iconic orange box lies a very different story. One stitched together not in Parisian workshops, but across oceans, in quiet industrial parks in China, in Portugal, in Madagascar. Far from the French countryside, bags are being assembled in fluorescent-lit factories. Silent workers meet quotas. Exotic leather is pre-cut, mass-dyed, and funneled down the global supply chain like any other commodity. The final French artisan may stitch the handle or sign a date code, but the bulk of the labor? Outsourced. It's not illegal. It's not even unusual. Most fashion houses do it. But Hermes didn't just sell luxury. They sold purity. They sold exclusivity. The idea that your $30,000 bag was born in the land of fine wine and aristocrats, not mass-produced overseas like an iPhone. That illusion begins to crack when you realize just how curated the entire narrative is. Hermes store clerks are trained to speak with reverence about the craftsman who made your bag. Auctioneers at Sotheby's reference the French provenance of each Birkin, whispering about wait lists and legacy. And influencers? They film unboxings as if it were a religious ritual. Orange ribbon, tissue paper, the faint Hermes scent. But here's the truth. That ritual is packaging. The story you've been sold is a stage play, and the myth of made in France. It's as carefully constructed as the bag itself. Documents show Hermes has long relied on global subcontractors, some authorized, others murkier. And while a portion of the assembly process may legally allow the company to stamp "Made in France" on the final product, insiders say much of the grunt work happens elsewhere. Leather skiving, edge painting, handle shaping, tasks that can easily be done in bulk, far from Paris. So why the secrecy? Because the illusion is everything. Hermes doesn't just sell handbags. They sell a fantasy of European prestige. A dream that collapses the moment you picture your $40,000 Birkin being rolled down a factory conveyor belt in Guangdong. It's not just about luxury. It's about identity, status, control. And once people realized the truth, they started asking, if the bags aren't really made in France, what else have we been lied to about? The lore is cracking. And in the next chapter, the camera zooms in, not on the boutiques of Saint Honoré, but inside the real factories where the magic actually happens. So the myth is cracked. But now, it's time to step into the heart of the machine. Strip away the velvet curtains, the Parisian boutiques, and the well-rehearsed brand stories. And what you'll find is what TikTok showed us. Receipts. Because nothing exposes a luxury lie quite like a viral video. And this time, it came straight from the source. In late 2024, a series of TikToks began to circulate, quietly at first. No captions, no flashy editing. Just raw, shaky footage of factory workers in China delicately assembling what appeared to be Hermes handbags. Not replicas. Not knockoffs. These weren't being made on the streets of Shenzhen for the counterfeit market. No, these were near-finished Birkins and Kellys, crafted with astonishing precision, inside sterile factories located in Guangdong and Shandong provinces. Zoom in on one of the clips. A young woman, her hair tucked under a cap, bends over a station flooded in white light. She's heat-sealing a strip of Epsom leather, pressing it with the same tools you'd find in a Hermes artisan's kit. Another video shows a worker painting the signature edge coat onto the leather strap, a process typically reserved for master artisans in Paris, now performed thousands of miles away by someone working a 10-hour shift on a tight quota. One clip even shows a table stacked with orange boxes. Yes, the orange boxes, waiting to be packed and shipped. For retail? Maybe not. For final assembly in France? Possibly. But the implication was clear. The production pipeline runs far deeper and far wider than Hermes wants the public to believe. The videos exploded. Within days, the clips amassed millions of views and were reposted across Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and Weibo. Commentary poured in, not just from fashion lovers, but from economists, whistleblowers, and even former luxury retail employees. People weren't just shocked. They were angry. The outrage was immediate and visceral. Why am I paying $30,000 for something that costs $1,400 to make in a Chinese factory? So, it's basically Shine, but with a ribbon? Where's the handmade in France craftsmanship I've been sold all these years? And here's what stung Hermes the most. The footage didn't show sloppy knockoff work. It wasn't grainy footage of back-alley fake factories. It showed competence. It showed efficiency. It showed organized production with professional-grade tools, quiet teams, and disciplined precision. In other words, it looked like any other luxury brand's real supply chain. Except Hermes has always insisted it wasn't like the others. And while experts in the luxury world have long known that final assembly in France is enough to earn the Made in France label under EU law, the public didn't. Consumers were operating under the assumption that their bag was born and raised in the French countryside, not just finished there like a microwave dinner being reheated and plated. Even more damning, some videos included snippets of internal product codes, date stamps, and serial formats used by Hermes to track its production timeline. Collectors began to compare them. Bag authenticators who'd spent years decoding Hermes' hidden symbols started raising eyebrows. Could it be that some of the very same bags flaunted by celebrities, auctioned off for six figures, or pulled from store safes for VIP clients actually originated on the same assembly line caught on camera? The timing couldn't have been worse. Hermes had just raised prices again, citing inflation, craftsmanship, and scarcity. Meanwhile, the TikTok algorithm was feeding users video after video of handbags rolling down belts and being packed into boxes that looked eerily familiar. What had once been whispered in fashion backrooms, "You know these aren't really made entirely in France, right?" was now being broadcast on every smartphone screen around the world. And just like that, the aura of mystique, gone, replaced by fluorescent lights, quotas, and the cold precision of factory labor. And once the footage went viral, Hermes went silent, at least for a while, until the lawsuit hit. But we'll get to that, because next, we follow the paper trail even deeper to the subcontractors, the corporate shell games, and the real cost of maintaining a lie so expensive it had to be stitched shut with silence. If the viral factory videos ripped the veil off the production process, Tanner Leatherstein came in and set the whole illusion on fire. Enter the man who doesn't just talk leather, he dissects it, literally. Known to his followers as a leather chemist, Tanner Leatherstein isn't just some internet personality doing hot takes on TikTok. He's a trained leatherworker with a deep background in tanning, chemistry, and material science. His content, painfully honest, unapologetically technical, and often devastating for luxury brands. And then it happened. The video. One Birkin bag. Retail price, $25,000. Real, authenticated, purchased, and ready for surgery. The clip opens like a true crime documentary. Tanner gently places the iconic orange box on the table. Out comes the Birkin. Soft Togo leather, palladium hardware, stitching pristine. He holds it with reverence before pulling out a scalpel. What followed was nothing short of luxury heresy. With each slice, stitch, and tear, Tanner peeled back the myth Hermes had built over generations. And what he found changed the game. The total material and construction cost, by his expert estimate, just under $600. Let that sink in. $600. That includes leather, hardware, labor, tooling, the entire bag. Not including marketing, yes. Not including retail markup, sure. But $600 for a bag that sells for $25,000 and, in the resale market, sometimes six figures. And what's more, Tanner didn't just stop at the price tag. He critiqued the construction. The stitches were clean, yes. But the techniques? Standard. The leather? Good quality, but not significantly better than mid-range artisan work. He noted that certain structural reinforcements were lacking. The kind of choices made when a product is optimized for mass production, not pure craftsmanship. He even compared the Birkin to a $300 handmade bag from a small Turkish atelier, and the differences were shockingly minimal. Suddenly, the Hermes aura didn't look like the summit of artisanal excellence. It looked like a branding masterclass, packaged in exclusivity and sealed with centuries of storytelling. And the internet ate it up. Tanner's video was reposted across YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok. Reaction channels lit up. Fashion influencers who used to flaunt their Hermes collections started going quiet, or worse, defensive. The phrase, "You're not paying for quality, you're paying for the logo," trended for weeks. This wasn't some basement conspiracy theory. This was a technical teardown done by someone with nothing to gain and everything to reveal. But more than that, it was the emotional betrayal that hit hardest. Because people wanted to believe. The Hermes customer isn't like your average shopper. They're collectors, loyalists. They spend years on wait lists. They build relationships with sales associates. They buy homeware and scarves just to earn the right to maybe buy a Birkin. They don't just buy a product, they invest in a myth. And now, that myth was unraveling stitch by stitch. What Tanner proved wasn't just that the margins were absurd. People already suspected that. What he exposed was the disconnect between price and craftsmanship. The reality that luxury in 2025 doesn't always mean superior materials or time-honored skills. Sometimes it just means you're really good at making people feel like they're buying into something rare. But how rare is it, really, if it's being pumped out of multiple factories across continents, then stitched up in France just long enough to earn a label? And if a leather chemist with a scalpel can rip apart the most iconic status symbol in fashion history and find it indistinguishable from a mid-tier handmade bag, then what exactly are we buying? A feeling, a fantasy, a fiction dressed in Epsom leather. But the story doesn't end there, because now that the truth is leaking out and the experts are talking, Hermes has to respond. And when it didn't clarify. It didn't apologize. It sued. And in doing so, they may have revealed more than they ever intended. What started as a few TikToks from Chinese factories, what escalated with a scalpel slicing through a $25,000 Birkin, has now become a full-blown identity crisis for the luxury fashion world. The ripple effect? Immediate, violent, and still unfolding. Let's start with the resale market, the backbone of Hermes' mystique. For years, platforms like the RealReal, Vestiaire Collective, and Prive Porter thrived on one thing: the illusion of scarcity. A Birkin wasn't just a handbag, it was an asset class. Buyers saw them as safer than gold. Some even used them like investment portfolios, tracking resale values, building collections, timing the market. But after the factory leaks, and especially after Tanner Leatherstein's teardown, the market tanked. Not across the board, not immediately. But the change was clear. Prices on secondary platforms dipped 10 to 15% for certain Birkin and Kelly models that were once bulletproof. Resellers started fielding panicked messages from clients. Longtime collectors debated whether to hold, sell, or just pretend they didn't see the video. And investor chatter? It went from celebratory to cautious overnight. Major funds that had previously backed fashion tech, authenticated resale startups, and direct-to-consumer luxury ventures started to pull back. Analysts on luxury earnings calls began asking uncomfortable questions about supply chain transparency. Shareholders who once worshipped at the altar of high margins now wondered if those margins were masking something more sinister: deception. Because once Hermes stumbled, the spotlight turned. First stop, Louis Vuitton. LVMH, the titan of titans, tried to stay quiet, but the internet had already moved on. Footage started surfacing from their global suppliers. Leaked audio from employee forums, old court documents about working conditions, whispers of overproduction and destruction quotas to preserve scarcity. All of it started trending again. Next, Gucci. People dug up the infamous 2018 expose about Italian factories subcontracting to underpaid Chinese laborers operating in backrooms near Florence. The same Made in Italy label attached to products made for a fraction of the final price. TikTokers began stitching clips of Gucci's runway shows with footage of the alleged real workshops. The contrast was jarring. Then, Prada. Photos from Albanian and Romanian facilities resurfaced, once dismissed, now reframed through this new, skeptical lens. Craftsmanship, or rebranded fast fashion with better lighting. Even Chanel wasn't spared. A 2023 labor investigation into its glove suppliers in Hungary suddenly went viral again. Users weren't just consuming this content. They were connecting the dots, building timelines, tracking how deep this rabbit hole really went. And as these receipts piled up, the sentiment shifted. It wasn't just about Hermes anymore. It wasn't just about a single bag or one chemist with a scalpel. It was about trust. The same trust that justified five-figure price tags. The trust that turned logos into lifestyles. The trust that made people believe they were buying into heritage, not just hype. Now, that trust is shattered. Gen Z buyers, the next generation of luxury's lifeblood, have already shown they value authenticity and transparency over prestige. And this scandal, it confirmed their worst suspicions. That the luxury industry wasn't sacred. It was just better at storytelling. In response, some influencers began openly denouncing luxury goods. Former brand ambassadors quietly untagged posts. Fashion YouTubers who once posted unboxings started uploading "Why I'm selling my Birkins" confessionals. Reddit threads filled with first-time buyers asking if their dream bags were still worth it. And meanwhile, behind closed doors, brands panicked. Internal memos were circulated. Legal teams were activated. PR departments went into crisis mode. Some quietly edited website copy to use more vague phrases like European assembly. Others ramped up sustainability and transparency campaigns, hoping it wasn't too little, too late. But the damage was already done. Because for the first time in decades, luxury was vulnerable. No amount of runway shows, celebrity endorsements, or lavish ad campaigns could cover the simple, brutal truth. People had seen behind the curtain, and what they saw looked a lot more like mass production than magic. The old playbook, scarcity, mystery, legacy, was cracking. And in the fissures, a new consumer consciousness was growing. One that demanded proof, not just prestige. One that asked, if you're charging me $30,000, show me where that money goes. And if Hermes, the crown jewel, could be brought down a few notches by a leather chemist and a factory worker with a smartphone, then what hope did the rest of the industry have? The ripple wasn't a wave anymore. It was a reckoning. When the TikToks went viral and Tanner Leatherstein's scalpel sliced straight through Hermes' billion-dollar narrative, the House of Orange didn't just sit back and sip champagne in silence. They mobilized. Fast. What followed wasn't just a PR response. It was an all-out corporate panic attack, disguised in silk and legalese. Behind closed doors at 24 Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, boardrooms lit up with crisis meetings. Law firms were looped in. Phones rang off the hook. Interns were scrubbing social media feeds before you could say Birkin scandal. Hermes lawyered up. In China, they filed lawsuits against unnamed factory workers and TikTok accounts tied to the viral videos. The language? Brutal. The charges? Theft of trade secrets, industrial espionage, and intellectual property violations. But let's be clear, this wasn't just about stopping leaks. It was about sending a message. To employees, to critics, to anyone who dared tug at the seams of the Hermes illusion. The strategy was simple: silence through fear. File hard, file fast, file globally. And they didn't stop there. According to leaked legal documents from a Beijing district court, Hermes even requested cooperation from Chinese cyber authorities to scrub videos from the local internet, labeling them as reputation-damaging misinformation. That's right. Videos showing actual bag assembly were now rebranded as threats to national luxury order. Meanwhile, in the West, Hermes' legal arm began monitoring influencers, journalists, and critics who reposted the footage. Multiple creators received soft takedown notices, not official DMCA claims, but friendly warnings from Hermes legal reps reminding them about defamation and unauthorized use of trademark content. Translation? Take it down, or we escalate. Now let's talk about the PR counterattack, because while legal hammers were swinging, Hermes was also working overtime to patch the cracks in their pristine facade. The company released a carefully worded statement. All Hermes handbags are handcrafted by highly skilled artisans, primarily in our French workshops. Notice the word, primarily. That subtle linguistic pivot? That's the escape hatch. They never say only France. They never say exclusively. It's a legal smokescreen, just vague enough to dodge perjury, just polished enough to sound reassuring to casual fans who didn't watch the TikToks. And then came the controlled press tours. Luxury insiders noticed a sudden uptick in influencer invitations to French ateliers. Fashion YouTubers and lifestyle bloggers were flown to see the craftsmanship for themselves. The footage? Same old tropes. Women in white coats, delicate hands stitching leather, tools clinking softly on wooden tables. But here's the thing. Those ateliers haven't changed in decades. What has changed is scale. Let's do the math. Hermes sells tens of thousands of Birkins and Kellys annually. They claim to employ roughly 4,500 artisans globally, with only a portion dedicated to bags. And each bag takes 15 to 20 hours to make by hand, at least. Something doesn't add up. Even the most generous production math suggests either a factory full of clones working around the clock in some mythical French dimension, or there's a whole secondary production pipeline they're not telling us about. And here's where the narrative collapses. Because while Hermes champions its exclusive, slow luxury, its output numbers mirror fast fashion growth rates. In the last decade, they've expanded production to meet demand in Asia and the Middle East. New workshops have popped up across Europe and quietly in Asia, too. And yet, the branding remains frozen in time. Always Paris, always heritage, always hand-stitched magic by artisans trained for years. But the internet doesn't buy fairy tales anymore. It asks for receipts. And what it found were inconsistencies, contradictory public statements, and intimidation tactics meant to scare truth-tellers into silence. Luxury watchdogs started compiling timelines. Hermes says bags are handmade in France. TikToks show assembly in Guangdong. Hermes claims they limit production to preserve rarity. Resale platforms are flooded with new condition bags. Hermes posts videos of serene ateliers. Factory leaks show conveyor belts and LED lid inspection rooms. The illusion was cracking. And rather than admit to globalized production realities, Hermes chose the old-school, elite playbook. Threaten, distract, deny. But here's the problem with fighting fire with lawsuits. The internet doesn't forget. Screenshots, stitches, commentary videos, they live on, circulating beyond any single platform, beyond the reach of any cease and desist letter. So now Hermes is cornered, defensive in public, aggressive in private. Their lawsuits scream injustice, but their actions whisper cover-up. And for a brand built entirely on perception, perception is everything. They might win in court. They might even silence a few TikTokers. But the damage to their narrative, the myth of artisanal purity, is already done. And the public? They're not buying the bags, the story, or the spin. They're buying the truth. And the truth is bad for business. Once upon a time, walking into a room with a Birkin on your arm was a declaration of status. Power, taste, wealth. You didn't have to say a word. Your bag screamed it for you. And if you were lucky enough to be photographed with one, instant cachet, validation, envy. But now, you walk in with a Birkin and people are squinting, side-eyeing, whispering behind their phones. Is it real? Did they get it from that TikTok factory? Or is it just PR? And why are they still flaunting that bag? That envy has curdled into something darker. Luxury shame is real, and it's coming fast for the celebrities and influencers who once helped build this house of cards. Let's start on the red carpet. At this year's award season, stylists were quietly pulling Hermes, Louis Vuitton, even Chanel accessories from their style boards. Not because the brands lacked glamour, but because the conversation had shifted. The same audiences that once praised timeless French chic were now dragging stars in the comments. Why are you wearing a $30,000 bag made in a Chinese factory? Did you really spend $20,000 on something with a $600 production cost? Support artisans, not corporations. Even celebs with real connections to these houses are being forced to adjust. Insiders report that one major A-lister, who's known for her Hermes collection, switched out her Birkin for a vintage Coach clutch at the last minute, just to dodge the online fallout. And on TikTok? Oh, it's brutal. Fashion creators used to brag about securing their first Birkin through the game at the Hermes boutique. Now, they're comparing leather quality between fakes and real ones and finding little difference. One viral creator even said, if the authentic bag was made in a Guangdong factory too, then what am I really paying for? The stitching? The ego? Ouch. Influencers are caught in the middle. Some are doubling down, posting disclaimers about how they got their bag years ago or were gifted directly from Paris. Others are bailing altogether, de-influencing their luxury hauls, swapping their Birkins for sustainable brands, vintage finds, or emerging artisans from places like Morocco, Mexico, and Thailand. It's no longer about status. It's about transparency, authenticity, ethics, and Gen Z. They're leading the rebellion. On Reddit, forums like our /female fashion advice and our /luxury fails are exploding with posts from former luxury lovers expressing disillusionment. These are not bro critics throwing shade. These are past customers saying, I used to dream of the Birkin. Now I cringe when I see one. And this isn't just about Hermes. Louis Vuitton's factory videos from Texas. Gucci's overseas outsourcing scandals. Prada's recycled runway pieces being passed off as new season. The rot runs deep. The craftsmanship halo that once shielded these brands is flickering. Social commentary shows the shift in tone. Luxury no longer equals reward. It equals excess, disconnection, blindness. In a world where climate collapse, labor abuse, and economic inequality dominate the headlines, flaunting a $38,000 handbag feels less like inspiration and more like provocation. The aspirational class is becoming the apologetic class. And influencers? They're walking a tightrope between staying relevant and being labeled tone-deaf. Even parody accounts are cashing in on the moment. Skits show influencers pretending to return their Birkins after finding out it was made in the same factory as a knockoff. One viral tweet read, buying a luxury bag in 2025 is like investing in a Rolex that turns out to be assembled by Temu interns. The satire writes itself. What used to be flex culture is now fraud culture. And we're not just laughing, we're interrogating. So what's next? The future of luxury might not be in Paris or Milan. It might be on Etsy, on Instagram shops, in the hands of artisans who sign their work, not corporations who hide behind legacy. We're witnessing a seismic cultural shift where the true currency is truth and the new luxury is integrity. Because when a $25,000 Birkin can't survive a $3 TikTok stitch, the real question becomes, what were we ever buying in the first place? Now that the world has peeked behind the velvet curtain, seeing the TikToks, the factories, the lawsuits, the leather breakdowns, Hermes finds itself at a crossroads. The illusion has cracked, the mystique has faded, and the public? They're not just watching, they're demanding answers. So what does Hermes do now? They have 3 plays. Only 3. And each one comes with a cost. Option 1, double down on scarcity. This is the classic Hermes playbook. Tighten the noose. Clamp down even harder on availability. Reduce the number of bags in circulation. Make that Birkin even harder to get than before. No appointments, no walk-ins, no exceptions. Only the ultra-elite with deep pockets and deeper connections get in. They'll spin it like this. Craftsmanship takes time. Our wait list protects quality. But let's be honest, that excuse is starting to rot. The problem? The internet exists. People now know there are warehouses in Guangdong and Shandong pumping out half-assembled Birkins for $600 a pop. The myth of handcrafted in a hidden Parisian atelier has lost its grip. And if Hermes tries to gatekeep even harder, the backlash will escalate. Because in a post-exposure world, scarcity doesn't feel special anymore. It feels manipulative. Option 2, radical transparency. Now, this would be bold and unprecedented. Hermes could come clean. Admit that their global supply chain includes Asia. Publish sourcing reports. Open up about materials, labor, costs. Maybe even reframe their pricing around exclusivity as an aesthetic, not just artisan labor. This is the Patagonia pivot for luxury. The upside? They'd win back the segment of consumers who value ethics over elitism. Gen Z, sustainability advocates, socially conscious celebs. The people who are ready to spend if you stop lying to them. The risk? Admitting the truth means surrendering the fantasy. The orange box would never mean the same thing again. The mystique would evaporate, and Hermes would become what it never wanted to be. Just another brand explaining itself. Transparency could save their soul, but might kill their status. Option 3. Suppression and denial. The most likely move? They'll lawyer up, silence whistleblowers, scrub the TikToks, tighten contracts, and go into damage control. Cease and desist orders. NDA threats. Strategic PR placements in fashion magazines. They'll try to make this go away. You'll hear phrases like, misinformation is being spread. Our commitment to quality remains unwavering. These claims are being handled through legal channels. But here's the kicker. It's too late. The genie's out of the bottle. The receipts are viral. Influencers are testing leathers on camera. Experts are disassembling $25,000 bags like it's a science experiment. And the resale market is tanking. Suppressing the truth won't stop the collapse. It'll only slow it down, while burning brand trust in the process. The ripple effect across fashion. And Hermes won't fall alone. Every luxury house that built its empire on mystique instead of transparency is now shaking. Louis Vuitton, Prada, Gucci, they're all watching this unfold like it's a masterclass in how not to handle a scandal. If Hermes goes down, or even just stumbles, investors will panic. Consumers will get louder. And the brands that thrived on illusion will have two options: adapt or crumble. We are entering a new era. The era of the informed consumer, where TikTok exposés move faster than runway shows, where leather chemists get more views than luxury ads, where scarcity, once a flex, is now a red flag. So here's the final question. Is luxury dying, or is it finally being exposed? Because maybe, just maybe, what we called luxury all along wasn't really luxury at all. Just myth, markup, marketing, and now the curtain's down.